The late summer sky was bruised purple and orange as the five of us huddled around the campfire, laughing over burnt marshmallows and swapping ghost stories that none of us believed. It had been Jules' idea to hike to Black Hollow. She'd read about it online, an untouched stretch of dense forest, miles from any roads or cell service. A true wilderness experience. Jules was always chasing adventure, and we followed, like we always did. "It's supposed to be haunted," Jules said, poking at the embers. Her flashlight cast dancing shadows on the tall pines surrounding our clearing. "They say people disappear out here." "Please," groaned Marcus, leaning back against his pack. "You're just trying to freak us out." "Not me," Jules grinned. "The internet. Lots of stories, people see things in the trees. Hear things. The forest just swallows them whole." "Creepy," muttered Ben, glancing over his shoulder. He always hated these kinds of stories, even though he'd never admit it. "It's all fake," I said, stretching my legs toward the fire. "Urban legends. Nothing more." By the time we crawled into our tents, the laughter had faded, leaving an uneasy silence in its wake. The forest loomed around us, impossibly dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It was around 3 a.m. when it happened. I woke to the sound of something crunching outside my tent. My heart thundered in my chest as I strained to listen, every muscle taut. At first, I thought it was one of the others getting up, but the sound was wrong, too heavy. Too deliberate. I unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The fire had burned low, casting the clearing in flickering shadows. Beyond the light, the trees stretched like jagged teeth into the night. And then I saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the forest, just barely visible in the pale moonlight. Tall and impossibly still, its outline seemed wrong, like the proportions didn't quite make sense. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. It just stood there, half hidden in the dark. I scrambled back into my sleeping bag, too afraid to look again. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out every other sound. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just a trick of the shadows, that I was imagining things. When morning came, I almost believed it. Ben was missing. We discovered it when Jules tried to wake him for breakfast. His tent was open, his sleeping bag empty, his pack untouched. "Ben." Jules called, her voice tight with worry. The forest swallowed the sound. "No way," Marcus said, pacing near the fire. "He wouldn't just leave. Not without his gear." "We should look for him," I said, already pulling on my boots. I hadn't told anyone about what I'd seen the night before, but the memory of the figure chilled me to my core. "Maybe he went to the bathroom or something," suggested Mia, though her voice was unconvincing. We all knew Ben was terrified of the dark. He wouldn't have wandered far alone, not at night. We spent hours searching, calling his name, but the forest seemed endless. The trees pressed in from all sides, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. The further we went, the harder it became to keep track of where we'd come from. "Guys," Jules finally said, her voice trembling, "I think we should go back. We're not going to find him like this." Reluctantly, we returned to camp. That night, I stayed awake, eyes fixed on the edge of the clearing. The fire burned brighter this time, but it didn't feel like enough. Every shadow looked like it was waiting for me to blink. Then, just before dawn, I saw it again. The figure was closer now, just beyond the trees. It stood in the same unnatural stillness, watching. Waiting. I didn't sleep. I didn't dare. The morning light brought no relief. I sat by the smoldering ashes of the fire, my nerves raw, while the others emerged from their tents. I didn't mention what I'd seen, it sounded insane, even to me, but I couldn't stop glancing toward the trees. Mia was the first to notice something else was wrong. "Where's Ben's tent?" she asked, her voice trembling. We all turned to look. Ben's tent, which had been there the day before, was gone. Not just packed up or collapsed, gone, as if it had never been there at all. "This is crazy," Marcus muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Are you sure this is the same spot?" "Of course it is," Jules snapped, her voice sharp with fear. "We didn't move camp." The rest of us stood in stunned silence, staring at the empty patch of ground where Ben's tent had been. No footprints, no signs of disturbance, just the faint indent of where it had once stood. "We need to get out of here," Mia said, hugging herself. "Ben's gone. His stuff's gone. This place isn't right." "She's right," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "We should pack up and head back. Now." Jules hesitated, glancing toward the thick line of trees. "What if he comes back?" "He's not coming back," Marcus said grimly, shoving his gear into his pack. We were ready to leave within an hour, the forest strangely silent around us. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just the faint whisper of the wind through the pines. It felt like the trees were listening. Jules led the way, map in hand, but after what felt like hours of walking, the path started to look wrong. "We should have reached the main trail by now," Jules muttered, checking the map again. "Maybe we missed it," Mia suggested, her voice tight with anxiety. "We didn't miss it," Jules snapped, shoving the map into her pocket. "This is the right way." But it wasn't. The trees around us seemed to grow thicker, their trunks gnarled and twisted. The sunlight struggled to break through the canopy, casting the forest in an eerie, perpetual twilight. "We're going in circles," Marcus said, stopping abruptly. "I swear we passed that tree before." "You're imagining things," Jules insisted, though her voice wavered. "No, he's right," I said, pointing to a low-hanging branch marked with deep scratches. "I saw that earlier too." Jules stared at the branch, her face pale. "That's not possible." "Neither is Ben disappearing," Mia snapped. "But it happened. Something's wrong with this place." The tension between us grew thick, but there was no arguing with the evidence. We had no choice but to set up camp again as night fell, trapped in a forest that refused to let us leave. The fire burned bright, but the air felt colder. We sat close together, eating in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. "I saw something last night," I finally blurted out, unable to keep it in any longer. The others turned to look at me, their faces shadowed by the flickering light. "What do you mean, something?" Jules asked. "A figure," I said, my throat dry. "In the trees. It was just, standing there. Watching." Mia's eyes widened. "You're joking." "I'm not," I said. "It was there the night Ben disappeared. And last night, it was closer." Marcus shook his head. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it sounds crazy." I snapped. "But you all know something isn't right here. You felt it too." Silence fell over the group, heavy and suffocating. "It's just the forest messing with us," Jules said, though she didn't sound convinced. "The dark, the isolation, it's making us paranoid." "Then why can't we leave?" Mia whispered. No one had an answer. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Around midnight, I heard it, the faint rustle of leaves, the snap of a branch. My heart hammered in my chest as I sat frozen, staring at the trees beyond the firelight. And then I saw it again. The figure was closer now, its silhouette clearer. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long, thin limbs that stretched unnaturally. Its head tilted as if studying me, its movements jerky and inhuman. I wanted to scream, to warn the others, but no sound came out. The figure took a step closer. And then another. I clutched my knees to my chest, unable to tear my eyes away. The fire seemed dimmer, the shadows deeper. When the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, the figure was gone. But its presence lingered, a weight in the air that refused to lift. The dawn brought no comfort. I stayed by the dying embers of the fire, shaking as the others emerged from their tents. My head throbbed from lack of sleep, and my nerves were raw. "You look awful," Jules said, crouching next to me. I ignored her, my gaze fixed on the edge of the clearing. I kept expecting to see it again, that figure, lurking just beyond the light. "I saw it again," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jules blinked. "Saw what?" "The figure," I said. "It's closer now. It moved last night." Her face twisted in disbelief, but before she could argue, Marcus shouted, "Guys!" We turned to see him standing near the edge of the clearing, holding something in his hands. It was a scrap of fabric, torn and dirted, but unmistakably from Ben's jacket. "Where did you find that?" Jules demanded, rushing over. "Over here," Marcus said, pointing to a low bush. "It was caught on a branch." "That means he's still out there," Mia said, hope flickering in her voice. "Or it means something else has it," Marcus muttered darkly. No one responded to that. We decided to follow the trail, hoping it would lead us to Ben. The forest felt even more oppressive as we moved deeper into its grasp. The air was heavy, the light dim, and every step seemed to echo too loudly. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Jules took the lead again, her map clutched tightly in one hand. She didn't bother pretending we were on the right path anymore, none of us did. We weren't in control here. "Look," Mia said, pointing ahead. A tree stood in our path, its bark etched with deep scratches. They weren't random marks, they formed a pattern, something almost like a symbol. "What the hell is that?" Marcus asked, running his fingers over the grooves. "It's nothing," Jules said quickly, her voice too sharp. "Let's keep moving." But it wasn't nothing. We saw more of them as we walked, carved into trees at irregular intervals. Each one seemed to hum with a faint energy, a presence that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. By the time we found the next clue, the sun was dipping low again. It was a piece of Ben's pack, torn and muddy, lying in the middle of a narrow game trail. "This is insane," Marcus said, pacing back and forth. "We're chasing ghosts. We should have left yesterday. We can't just leave him." Jules snapped. "We can't leave, period," I said, my voice hollow. The others turned to me, their expressions wary. "What do you mean?" Jules asked. "I think the forest won't let us," I said. "Every time we try to leave, it keeps pulling us back. We're trapped." "That's ridiculous," Jules said, though she didn't sound convinced. "Is it?" Mia whispered. "Everything feels wrong here. The trees, the air, the way time doesn't feel right." "What if he's right?" "We're not trapped," Jules insisted. "We just haven't found the trail yet. That's all." That night, the fire felt weaker, its glow barely reaching the edges of our camp. We huddled close together, but no one spoke. The silence was too heavy, broken only by the occasional crackle of burning wood. I kept my eyes on the trees, every shadow a potential threat. I knew it would come back. And it did. It appeared just after midnight, standing at the edge of the clearing. This time, the others saw it too. What is that?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. The figure was closer than before, its twisted form illuminated by the faint light of the fire. Its limbs were unnaturally long, its head tilted at an impossible angle. There was no face, just smooth, pale skin where its features should have been. "Is it, looking at us?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. "It doesn't have eyes," Jules whispered, her voice trembling. But it didn't need eyes. We all felt its gaze. "Don't move," I said, though I wasn't sure why. It felt like the wrong thing to do. The figure stepped closer. Mia whimpered, clutching Marcus' arm. Stay still, I repeated, my voice shaking. The figure took another step, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet with its strings tangled. It stopped just at the edge of the firelight, its head twitching. And then it raised one impossibly long arm, pointing directly at me. I couldn't breathe. What does it want? Jules whispered, her voice barely audible. No one answered. When dawn broke, the figure was gone again. But the forest felt different, heavier. It was like the trees had shifted closer during the night, pressing in on us from all sides. And that wasn't the worst part. Mia was gone. Her sleeping bag lay empty, her pack untouched. Just like Ben. No, Marcus said, his voice cracking. No, no, no. This isn't happening. She wouldn't just leave, Jules said, her hands shaking. She wouldn't. She's gone, I said, my voice hollow. The others turned to me, their faces pale. And whatever that thing is, I continued, it's not done with us yet. We searched for Mia for hours, calling her name until our voices cracked. The forest swallowed every sound, returning only the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a distant branch. She can't just be gone, Marcus muttered, his voice hoarse. His hands trembled as he clutched a flashlight, though the midday light made it unnecessary. She is, I said flatly. My throat was raw, my limbs heavy. Just like Ben. We don't know that. Jules snapped. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale, but she still clung to hope. She could be lost. Hurt, maybe. We can't give up on her. We won't, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his doubt. I didn't bother to argue. Deep down, I knew the truth, Mia wasn't lost. She'd been taken, by the thing in the woods. And if we didn't leave soon, it would come for us too. But how could we leave? The forest refused to let us go. The scratches on the trees grew more frequent as we wandered, each symbol more intricate and unsettling than the last. They seemed almost alive, pulsating faintly in the dim light. What are these? Marcus asked, stopping to trace one with his finger. Don't touch it, Jules snapped, pulling him back. Why not? He asked, glaring at her. Because we don't know what they are, she said. Or what they mean. They're warnings, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. Warnings about what? Marcus asked, his voice edged with anger. I didn't answer. By the time we stumbled back to the clearing, the sun was dipping low on the horizon. None of us wanted to admit it, but we were lost. No matter which direction we took, we always ended up back here, as though the forest was leading us in circles. This is impossible, Jules said, pacing near the fire pit. We've been walking for hours. We should be miles away by now. It's not impossible, Marcus said, sitting heavily on a log. It's this place. It's wrong. No, Jules insisted, though her voice trembled. We're just tired. Disoriented. We'll figure it out tomorrow. Tomorrow, I repeated bitterly. How many tomorrows do you think we'll have? Jules glared at me, but she didn't argue. That night, none of us slept. We sat around the fire, staring at the trees, waiting. The forest was alive with whispers, soft and insidious, just at the edge of hearing. I hate this, Marcus said, his voice barely audible. I hate this place. Shoo, Jules whispered, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the firelight. I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. It was back. The figure stood just beyond the edge of the clearing, its pale, featureless face catching the light of the fire. It was closer than it had ever been before, its unnaturally long limbs casting grotesque shadows across the ground. Don't move, I said, my voice shaking. The figure took a step closer. What does it want? Marcus whispered. I don't know, Jules replied, her voice trembling. The figure tilted its head, its movements jerky and unnatural. It raised one long, spindly arm and pointed, this time, at Marcus. He froze, his eyes wide with terror. What do I do?" he whispered. "Stay still," I said, though I had no idea if it would help. The figure took another step, its head twitching violently. It stopped just at the edge of the firelight, its thin, shadowy form looming over us. And then it spoke. Its voice wasn't a sound, exactly, it was more like a feeling, a vibration that settled deep in my bones. The words were unintelligible, but they filled my head, overwhelming every other thought. "Run!" Jules screamed, breaking the spell. We scattered, bolts of fear propelling us into the forest. I don't know how long I ran. The trees blurred around me, their twisted branches clawing at my clothes, my skin. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. When I finally collapsed, gasping for air, the forest was silent again. I was alone. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. I wandered aimlessly, every shadow a threat, every sound a potential predator. The forest seemed to shift around me, the trees closing in, their branches forming a labyrinth I couldn't escape. And then I heard it. A faint rustling, followed by a low, guttural growl. My heart stopped. I turned slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The figure was there, just a few feet away, its head tilted as it studied me. "Please," I whispered, though I didn't know what I was begging for. The figure took a step closer, its limbs unfolding like the legs of a spider. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a root. I hit the ground hard, the flashlight flying from my hand. In the dim light, I saw it crouch over me, its faceless head inches from mine. And then everything went black. When I woke, I was lying on the forest floor, cold and disoriented. My head throbbed, and every muscle in my body ached. The world around me was shrouded in gray mist, the trees stretching high into the colorless void above. For a moment, I thought I was alone. Then I saw them. Jules and Marcus were nearby, huddled together against the base of a tree. Jules was clutching a branch like a weapon, her knuckles white. Marcus sat with his back against the trunk, staring blankly into the fog. "Where are we?" I croaked, my voice hoarse and dry. Jules' head snapped toward me. Relief flickered across her face, quickly replaced by panic. "You're awake," she whispered, crawling over to me. "Are you okay?" I don't know," I said, struggling to sit up. My head swam, and I fought the urge to vomit. "What happened?" "It got you," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "We thought you were gone." "I don't remember," I said, shivering despite the oppressive humidity of the air. It was over me. And then it left," Jules said, her voice trembling. "It just disappeared into the fog." "But it didn't take you." "Why?" I asked. She didn't answer. The mist clung to the forest like a living thing, muffling every sound. We stayed close together, too afraid to wander far. "Is this the same place?" Marcus asked, breaking the heavy silence. Jules shook her head. "I don't know. Everything looks different." The trees around us were unfamiliar, their bark pale and smooth, like bones. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if it were pressing down on us. "It doesn't matter," I said, standing on unsteady legs. "We have to keep moving. We can't stay here." "Where are we supposed to go?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with desperation. "We're lost. We've been lost for days." "We'll figure it out," Jules said firmly, though her expression betrayed her doubt. We walked in silence, the mist curling around our feet like tendrils. The symbols on the trees had changed. They were larger now, more intricate, their shapes writhing as if alive. "Don't look at them," Jules warned. I tried not to, but the symbols seemed to pull at my gaze, filling my mind with fragmented images and half-heard whispers. Hours, or maybe days, passed. Time was meaningless here. The sun never rose or set, the mist never lifted. We stumbled through the forest, our movements sluggish, our breaths labored. That's when we found it. A clearing opened before us, the ground bare and blackened as if scorched by fire. At its center stood a crude structure, a towering mass of branches and bones woven together in impossible patterns. "What the hell is that?" Marcus whispered, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Jules said, her grip tightening on the branch she carried. "But we should stay away from it." "We can't," I said, surprising even myself. "We have to go closer." "Are you insane?" Jules snapped. "That thing, whatever it is, it's dangerous." "Everything here is dangerous," I said. "But this might be the only way out." Marcus hesitated, looking between us. "It feels wrong," he said finally. "But, he's right. We can't just keep wandering." Reluctantly, Jules followed as we approached the structure. The air grew colder as we drew near, the ground beneath our feet crunching like brittle glass. The symbols etched into the trees surrounded us, their glow pulsating faintly in the dim light. When we reached the base of the structure, I felt it, a pull, deep and visceral, dragging me forward. "Don't touch it," Jules hissed, grabbing my arm. But I couldn't stop myself. My hand moved as if guided by some unseen force, brushing against the rough surface. The world shifted. I was somewhere else. The forest was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of darkness. Shapes flickered at the edges of my vision, twisted, grotesque forms that writhed and whispered. The air was thick with an unnatural hum, vibrating in my chest. And then I saw it. The figure. It stood before me, its faceless head tilted, its long limbs stretched impossibly far. Around it, the darkness seemed to ripple, bending and warping in response to its presence. What do you want?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. It didn't respond. Instead, it raised one long arm and pointed. I turned to look and saw them, Jules and Marcus, lying unconscious on the forest floor. The figure's meaning was clear. It wanted them. "No," I said, shaking my head. "You can't have them." The figure tilted its head further, as if considering me. Then it stepped closer, its smooth, featureless face inches from mine. The hum grew louder, the darkness pressing in around me. And then I was back. I gasped, collapsing to my knees at the base of the structure. Jules and Marcus rushed to my side, their faces pale. "What happened?" Jules demanded. "You just froze." "It spoke to me," I said, my voice trembling. "What did it say?" Marcus asked. "It didn't use words," I said. "But I understood. It's not going to stop. Not until it takes us all." The realization settled over us like a shroud. We were running out of time. The oppressive silence of the forest grew heavier with every passing moment, suffocating any last remnants of hope. The structure loomed behind us, a grotesque monument to something ancient and malevolent. The thing in the woods was no longer toying with us, it was hunting us. "We can't stay here," Jules said, gripping the branch in her trembling hands. "We need to move." "Move where?" Marcus snapped. "There's nowhere to go. That thing, it's everywhere." "There has to be a way out," I said, though the words felt hollow. The memory of the figure's faceless head and the pull of its presence sent a shiver down my spine. Marcus laughed bitterly. "A way out? Are you kidding me? We've been walking in circles for days. We're stuck here." "We aren't dead yet," Jules shot back, her voice sharp. "We can't just give up." Her defiance lit a small spark in me. She was right, if we stopped, we'd be giving ourselves to the forest, to that thing. And I wasn't ready to die. We moved cautiously, sticking close together as we left the clearing. The forest seemed different now, more hostile. The trees pressed in tighter, their branches twisting like claws. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath us felt spongy, like it was rotting from within. The symbols on the trees pulsed faintly, as if alive. They felt like eyes, watching our every move. "I hate this," Marcus muttered, his flashlight trembling in his grip. "You think we don't?" Jules snapped. "Quiet," I said, stopping abruptly. "What is it?" Jules asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I pointed ahead. In the distance, barely visible through the thick mist, was a flickering light. "A fire," I said, my heart racing. "It could be another group," Jules said, her voice tinged with hope. "Or it could be a trap," Marcus muttered. "We don't have a choice," I said, already moving toward it. The closer we got, the more my unease grew. The light flickered erratically, casting strange, distorted shadows. When we finally reached it, my stomach turned. The fire wasn't a campfire, it was a single, smoldering flame in the center of a circle of symbols carved into the ground. Around the circle were bones, some animal, some disturbingly human. "Oh my God," Jules whispered, covering her mouth. Marcus took a step back, his face pale. "What the hell is this?" "It's a ritual," I said, though I didn't know how I knew. "It's part of, whatever this thing is. This forest." The hum started again, faint but growing louder. "It knows we're here," Jules said, her voice shaking. "We need to go." "Wait," I said, staring at the symbols. They seemed to writhe and shift, drawing my attention like a magnet. "Maybe this is it. Maybe this is how we stop it." "You're insane," Marcus said. "We don't even know what this is. Do you have a better idea?" I snapped. I stepped into the circle, the air around me growing thick and heavy. My chest tightened, and every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stay. "What are you doing?" Jules called. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think this is what it wants." I knelt by the central flame, my fingers hovering over the nearest symbol. The hum grew louder, a deafening vibration that rattled my bones. And then I felt it. The figure was there, standing at the edge of the circle. Its faceless head tilted as it watched me, its long limbs twitching. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The hum changed, the symbols on the ground glowing brighter. I understood the answer, though no words were spoken. It wanted a trade. "No," Jules said, stepping toward me. "Whatever you're thinking, don't do it." "I don't have a choice," I said, tears streaming down my face. "It's the only way." Marcus grabbed my arm. "You don't even know what it's asking for." I looked at him, my voice breaking. "Yes, I do. The figure wanted me. If I gave myself to it, the others might escape." It was a terrible, impossible choice, but there was no other way. "I can't let you do this," Jules said, her voice trembling. "You have to," I said, pulling away. "If you stay, it'll take all of us. At least this way, you have a chance." "Wait," Marcus started, but it was too late. I reached into the flame. The world exploded in light and sound, the hum becoming a roar that filled my head. The figure stepped forward, its arms outstretched, and I felt its presence wrap around me like a vice. Pain lanced through me, sharp and unrelenting. The symbols on the ground blazed white-hot, their shapes burning into my vision. And then, just as suddenly, it was over. I opened my eyes to find myself alone. The clearing was gone, replaced by the same twisted trees and suffocating mist. The forest was silent, but I knew it wasn't empty. The figure was gone. Jules and Marcus were gone. But I was still here. I was part of it now. The forest had taken me, just like it had taken Ben and Mia. And it wasn't done yet. If you ever find yourself near Black Hollow, don't look into the forest. Don't listen to the whispers. And if you see a figure among the trees, run. Because once it sees you, it's already too late.